Hi and welcome to Best in Tesla. GM started cutting jobs in China. GM was one of the first foreign auto brands to enter the Chinese market, and its sales, which peaked at over 4 million units in 2017, fell by nearly half to 2.1 million last year. So GM can no longer just watch their ship sink in China. They have to try to get their company sized down to where they are no longer losing money. Because GM's Chinese business has already lost over $200 million in the first half of 2024. The end for GM in China is near, and if the trend continues, it will not be long before they will be kicked out of China and will become basically a US-only car maker. But at their home turf, there is also trouble, as we can see with the F-150 that is hitting alarming rates of inventory. So even their home harbor is not safe either. So let's check it all out and let's dive right in. In the January-July period of this year, SAIC GM sold 240,479 vehicles, down 55% from last year. In the first half, GM sold 225,600 units, whereas Tesla sold 426,600 units. Tesla has become almost twice the automotive brand in China than what GM is. And now GM is finally taking action accordingly, as GM reportedly started cutting jobs in China. General Motors has begun reducing its workforce in China and will soon convene with the local partners SAIC to discuss a major restructuring overhaul of the operation in the region. This move reflects the automaker's acknowledgement that it is unlikely to achieve the peak sale figures it reached in 2017, Bloomberg reported, citing people familiar with the matter. Yes, this will, in my opinion, only be the beginning, as China has already got over 50% plug-in market share, and GM really doesn't stand a chance to keep up in China anymore, with the extremely slow ramp of EVs we have seen from GM. That also has seen a lot of setbacks because of bad software for GM. First, we had the Blazer EV that got the order to stop all sales because of a mountain of software problems, just like we saw with Edmunds that tested out the car and wrote, "Our Chevy Blazer EV has 23 problems after only 2 months." And that was at the end of last year, and then they started the sales again up in March with a huge discount to try to get the sales going again. And now it is the Cadillac Lyriq, both the 2023 and 2024 model, that has to stop all sales because of software to hardware integration issues. Things are not looking too good for GM's EV adventure. And this is where China is going, and going fast. So don't think many Chinese will pick the GM product over the Chinese model like the Neo or the Xpeng or the BYD or even a Tesla. As we can always see, Tesla is selling more cars in general in China than GM. And the Model Y was ranked first among BEV models in China with wholesales of almost 300,000 units in the January to July numbers, with the BYD Seagull coming in at second and Tesla's Model 3 coming in at third. So Tesla is doing great in China, but GM is losing money in China now. GM's China operation lost $104 million in the most recent Q2 and lost in the first half of 2024 a total of $210 million. Even Mary Barra was out saying this situation is unsustainable. But GM was one of the first foreign auto brands to enter the Chinese market, and its sales, which peaked with 4 million units in 2017, fell by nearly half to 2.1 million last year. Yes, GM was the leader in China as one of the first foreign brands to sell cars in the country, but those times has come and gone. Just like we have seen here in Europe, where GM kind of disappeared in only 2 years. They once had 6.7% market share in Europe, but from 2016 to 2018, GM died in Europe and is no longer present on the continent. And now it seems like the same fate is waiting for them in China, the biggest car market on the planet, and GM is getting his ass kicked. AJ shared some great charts on X about the state of GM in China, where we can really see what is going on. In Q1 of 2024, General Motors' Chinese joint venture revenue dropped to the lowest number ever reported. So that's pretty bad. Sale has declined to a 12-year low. So that's pretty bad. And sales decreased 45% from peak trailing 12 month. Their net income dropped to a 15-year low. GM's income is down 83% from peak in 2018. As a result, margins turned from low to negative. In Q1 2024, General Motors joint ventures generated the biggest loss ever, excluding COVID in Q1 of 2020, of course. And in Q2, GM's Chinese market share experienced the biggest ever quarter-over-quarter market share loss. The trend is pretty clear. GM is dying in China. It is only a matter of time before we see GM pull out of China as they did in Europe, and will become basically a US-only company. And this is happening at the same time that Tesla is making a record number in China here in Q3 2024, closing the gap to the losses they made in the beginning of the year, and also have the best-selling EV in the country. The new kid is taking over from the old one. But this is basically the trend we have been seeing for GM over the past 8 years. They once sold over 10 million vehicles globally, but that is now down about 40% to only around 6 million. And within the next few years, we could see that be reduced to about 4 million, as they will lose the rest of China and only have the American market and the other small markets they are in around the world. Because there is nothing positive to say about GM's position in China. They simply don't have the vehicles that the Chinese want, and the Chinese homegrown companies already are making the vehicles that the Chinese want that is better than what GM can offer, and at a better price. And we see companies not only BYD but also Geely that are rising up very fast and will overtake Volkswagen maybe already next year. As you can see, there are already 7 Chinese brands that are bigger than GM in China as of today. The competition is fierce in China, and GM doesn't really have any countermove to the fast rising Chinese EV players that are quickly taking over in China. Together with Tesla, I might add, that has also rised up in China for the last 5 years, where GM has dropped off a cliff, together with most other legacy automakers in China. I personally think that GM could be one of the big legacy automakers that will be kicked out of China the fastest, as they don't have any compelling EV that people really want to buy, especially in China. And this all comes on top of them having to admit that they can't get to the EV target they promised in 2025, where they claim they will absolutely catch up to Tesla. And they're seeing demand problems with their EVs and cutting back on EV production and trying to push hybrids in a desperate attempt to keep this company afloat a little longer on their hybrid sales, as their ICE car business will inevitably be shrinking fast over the next 5 years, and they are not really in the EV race at all, as they have not even tried to sell over 100,000 EVs in a year. But we are still on track on hitting around 17 million EVs this year. So yes, plug-ins are not shrinking, they are still growing fast. So pretty embarrassing for the company that called themselves the leader in the EV race, and even had the President of the United States to say it as well. You led, and it matters. Well, you led your company to 0% in Europe, and now the same thing is playing out in China. And GM's economy of scale is shrinking fast, and that is why they now have to fire people in China, as they are geared up for a much bigger production, but the demand for their vehicles in China has basically been cut in half over the past 6 years. So now they are forced to adjust. How people can still think that GM is a good bet for the future of the car market is beyond my understanding. They have been bailed out once, but they have basically been doing nothing but shrink ever since they got bailed out. Let's see if that is going to happen again. Because if the trend we are seeing right now continues, it will not be many years before GM is cut in half globally from their peak of 10 million vehicles in 2018. But we are seeing all legacy automakers getting their ass kicked in China, but also seeing them struggle in most other places as well. So GM might end up being an US-only car company. But here we have Tesla that is making it tough for the legacy automakers, as well as we can also see with Ford, as Yaman wrote on X. Ford's inventory is piling up, with the Ford F-150 now sitting at an alarming 135 days of supply. So the upcoming $80,000 Tesla Cybertrucks and the rising competition from the Tesla Model Y, which is putting the pressure on the Ford Escape and the Edge sales, are leaving Ford in a tough spot. The future looks grim for the automaker as it struggles to keep up with the shifting market. Yes, even in the US, the old guys are struggling a bit, both because of the shifting markets, but also because people are holding on longer to their old cars, waiting to buy an EV, and Tesla brings out awesome cars that are cheaper but better what Ford is offering, and in many cases cheaper on true cost of ownership of most of Ford and GM's ICE vehicles in the US, as they are primarily focusing on big, expensive SUVs. At the same time, we have auto loans are becoming more difficult to get and objectively worse than it has been in 10 years, as Jeff pointed out on X. But this is all just catalysts that are hitting the legacy automakers to accelerate the downfall we have been seeing play out for the last 10 years. First it blamed it on COVID and then chip shortage, but the trend has been clear for almost a decade, and the trend is going down.
And thank you for watching. And until next time, take care out there and be nice.